Grab your families, head for the hills. The coloring book apocalypse is coming. We're gonna take over the world. Hello everyone, welcome back to the Mind of Watercolor. Well, yes, I've gone and done it. I've made an episode on coloring books, but not just any episode. The question came up, can you watercolor in any of the adult coloring books that are out there on the market now? And it's a great question because, as you know, unless you've been living in a cave somewhere, there are literally hundreds and hundreds of these adult coloring books. It's become a huge trend, fad, I don't know what you want to call it. And it's really cool. There's some really neat books. So how do you color in them, and can you use watercolor? Well, most of these coloring books are designed to use with colored pencil, or I think you get the best results. Markers are kind of hit or miss because there are quite a few of them that will bleed through, especially if the paper's too thin, but there are some that work. I think you can produce the most interesting results with colored pencil. However, a strong contender would be watercolor if you're able to paint on this paper, and that's where the rubber meets the road. The key is paper. Now I have 4 books here, and I picked all 4 of these for one specific reason. They all have varying grades of paper. Actually, each one in this stack gets a little bit heavier. This one on top represents probably the most common grade. It's basically just a standard bond type paper like you might put through a copy machine. Standard book weight paper. And the whole thing started out as a question, okay, that's mostly what I'm finding. Can I find anything better? Well, there's not many, but there are a few. I ran across this book, and as I compared the 2 types of paper, I found out, well, there is a little bit of a difference. And this is kind of what you have to do. Get them between your hands, kind of flick them a little bit. These 2 are not a lot different, but there's a little more snap and body to this paper. A little more heft. Then I found this. If you've looked at any of the adult coloring books, you no doubt have seen these. It's a very popular series. This is a Scottish illustrator by the name of Johanna Basford. And this printer just puts out a gorgeous book. You know, the foil stamping and embossing on the front. Just some really delightful illustrations. I love her work. But if that weren't enough, this paper is really pretty nice. It's got 1 grade higher yet than this book. So we stepped up again. And this is what you need to do if you really want to try to watercolor in these, because I'm going to show you in a few minutes it makes a difference. Then the other day I found this. This is creme de la creme, the best of the best. And this is made for wet media. This is actually a Bristol board or an illustration board. It's heavy. If I were comparing it to watercolor paper, I might say it's 200 pounds. And I have yet to try this. I can't wait to try this. So we're going to do this actually on camera for the first time. So let's get into it and see if I can offer you any tips and tricks in doing adult coloring book coloring with your watercolors. There are obviously several ways to watercolor, whether you're in a coloring book or not. And unless you're totally new to watercolor, you probably know what they are. The first is just a standard brush, standard palette of paint, and standard bucket of water. I'm not going to cover this method because one of the things that's neat about coloring in a coloring book is portability. Being able to take it with you when you go somewhere, you know, down in the living room while you're watching TV, any number of things. If you paint this way, you kind of have to set up like you're doing a painting in a studio. Because we aren't dealing with watercolor paper here, you have to treat the paper very gingerly. And that means you have to paint very dry. Now you can do that with the standard setup of water, paint, and palette, but it's a little more difficult. It's a little more finicky. You got to pay a little more attention to what you're doing. What I instead recommend is something a little more portable, like a water brush, a small travel palette like this. For one thing, you don't have to have a tub of water with you. Second of all, I find it easier to govern the moisture in these aqua brushes or these water brushes. All you have to have is a rag nearby, or I usually keep a blotter of paper towel just under my book or on my leg beside the book. And as you're painting along, if you feel like too much water's coming through the pen, you just simply blot it out. If it's too dry and you need more water, you just squeeze a little bit. Now the third way to paint, of course, is with watercolor pencil. Very effective way to go. Get yourself a small set like this is a set of 24. If you want to take your coloring book set with you, boom, you're ready to go. Now what I'm doing here is just filling in with a flat color. And the main thing is to make sure that you don't get the paper too wet. And I'll just try to paint. I'm actually pretty wet here, but I just try to paint as dry as I can. Now you'll see, and some of this I had already done, and I just wanted to see how far I could take the shading. But I've gotten some definite buckling in here. It's not terrible. I layer from the lightest to the darkest colors. Not only do I paint pretty dry, but I let it dry before I approach another layer, and I think that's important. You got to give every chance for this paper to recover, because it's just not going to stand up. Coloring is all about just get into the zone and find something easy and fun to do. This was my first try in this book, and I thought, let's just see what's possible with the worst paper out there. And even with this, it's possible to do some fun stuff. By the way, this is great practice for your regular painting, because by the time you've painted a page full of objects like this, like these leaves, and you practice doing one technique, like maybe shading and blending it out into a lighter color, by the time you've done that over and over and over again, you're going to be practically have mastered the technique. And trust me, if you can do it on this kind of paper, it's a whole lot easier to do it on watercolor paper, because watercolor paper is so much more forgiving. Now as I switched to this book with the slightly heavier paper, I noticed a difference right away. Just a little bit less tendency for the water to spot and show up in terms of too much absorption. Buckling is there, but it's less noticeable. But in reality, I'm not painting much different at all than I was in the lighter paper book. Still like I like using a water brush the best, keeping the paint very dry. The main point is just go easy with any of these papers. And just really have fun with the color. And have fun practicing your blending and your application skills. Now I'm going to color in this book, part of the Johanna Basford collection. By the way, I've put a link down in the description to an article about her. Scottish illustrator, just does beautiful work. And we've come to the third tier of my selection of books in paper quality and thickness. So we're going to see how this works out. Just by way of quick review, she has 3 books out. Secret Garden, which was her first and I think most popular. This one, Enchanted Forest, and another one called Lost Ocean. At least I think that's all the 3 she's done. But I love this one, this Enchanted Forest. Just some great illustration. And I love knowing the story behind the illustrator, rather than just coloring a bunch of random things that somebody has cranked out. The challenge is going to be, which one do I do? And I'd love to do one with some white space around it so I can practice with a little, or I can try out a little wet and wet. So I think I'm going to do one of these in the spread. So let's go for it. I'm going to start out with some watercolor pencils this time. And this is another method, as I mentioned earlier, that works pretty well. This is going down nice and smooth and creamy. I don't even necessarily need to activate it, but to try it and see what happens. I said it earlier, you know, that this is a great way to practice, and it's true even with these watercolor pencils, because it's got me thinking about how to apply the pencil, how to blend it, you know, what colors I'm going to put down to have a mix. When you activate watercolor pencil, not only does it smooth it and spread it, it also becomes a little more vibrant and intense. Because this is kind of a plate finish, watercolor is sort of beating up. It's not spreading real well, but still, it's a cool effect. Obviously, I've switched to palette paints here from watercolor pencil. But this kind of washy effect can only be achieved with watercolor, so it's just really neat to be able to add that to a coloring book, I think. Now, I could spend all day in this book, but I want to take you to the special book, the artist edition of Secret Garden. We're going to take a look at that. Last but not least, the artist edition Secret Garden with the heavy cardstock. And I noticed right away that this binding wasn't sewn like the Enchanted Forest book was. And I think that's because you can tear these cards out, paint them, color them, and frame them if you want. Put them on an easel as if you're doing a regular painted piece. Me, I'm going to keep them in the book. I just like the book. I like to keep these all together. But you have that option if you want to. Now basically what I want to try, I've already demonstrated some other techniques, but I want to see how well this does with wet and wet washes. So I'm just going to try that a little bit on some of this, maybe the central house. Now on this one I'm just using standard brush and palette. The thing I want to try right off the bat is some fairly wet washes. It's taking the moisture very, very well. This is not watercolor paper per se, but it does have a very illustration board feel to it. And I'm impressed. It's not like fine watercolor paper, but it sure is better than plain paper. Well, thanks everyone for watching. I think with that I'm going to bid you a farewell and keep on painting. I mean, I can't stop. This is obviously some clever alien plot. I've just turned into a pod person now who can't do anything but color. This has been a help to you. If you enjoyed this, give me a thumbs up, subscribe if you want to see more of my content, and I hope you'll have some fun this holiday season doing some coloring. Till next time, guys. Bye-bye.